Welcome back to Mr. Scare. For today's episode, I have a compilation of 4 scary school lockdown stories that will give you chills. But before I begin reading, make sure that you have subscribed to Mr. Scare for regular horror stories. It was a regular Thursday lockdown drill in school, and all of us were waiting for the bell to ring twice. It was so that we could complete the drill and sit back without any stress. The last hour of the school had started, but yet there was no sign of the bell ringing, which was very unusual. This made our professor a bit tense. So our professor went to the bell room to see what was wrong. And there it was. The bellman's neck was been slit, and his body was filled with blood oozing out. Seeing that, she screamed her way back toward the classroom. Everyone on the floor got alerted by the scream. As our professor was about to shut the door, the professor in the next classroom came by to see what was the chaos all about. When our professor told him about the bellman's situation, he went straight to his classroom and shut the door from out, and then with a calm mind, he made his way safely to the bell room to warn everyone else. He rang the bell thrice, and there they came, men in ninja attires but with rifles in hand and knives in their pockets. They took the professors and students who were loitering around as hostages. They used the speaker to tell us that our school had been taken over by gunmen because of an incident that happened 10 years ago in this very school hall. None of us knew what it was. We were scared, and we hid down under our desks and mostly as far from the door as possible. Our professor tried to keep us calm by saying that we are safe and that we would go home safely. She knew what happened 10 years ago, but won't open up about it. The terrorists were taking rounds when we heard that the children in the next classroom were held captive, as the teacher had locked them from outside. The students yelled as the terrorists tied them with ropes. They had big rifles pointing at them. Seeing this, my teacher couldn't hold back and went to them to help in some way or the other. While going, she asked us to lock the door from the inside. We pleaded for her to not go, but she said that being a teacher, it was her responsibility to take care of them, and that she would be fine. We did as she said, and our class representative took charge after. We don't know what happened later, except for all the screaming and crying that happened before the deafening shooting sounds that echoed across the hallways. Things were getting beyond serious now. So we decided to hatch a plot against the psycho killers. It was a tough task, but we gathered all possible things that could act as weapons, and broke the window glass, and then the door glass, to catch the attention of the gunman in the neighboring class. He came near the door to see what was happening when the fastest boy in the class hit his head with the fire extinguisher. He fainted then and there. We pulled him inside the classroom and tied him to the desk. Now we had taken one down, out of a total of 6. One of them was their leader. As we captured the gunman, a few of our students went to the other classroom and untied our professor and students in there. While doing this, 2 other gunmen came and pointed their rifles at the students. We thought that we were doomed when our teacher took the rifle of the first gunman and shot them from behind. This raised chaos and calm at the same time, but we had alerted the rest of the 3 terrorists as well. Now we had to lay a plan for capturing the main ones. It had been an hour since our parents waited for us near the school gate. The news reporters were showing the murdered watchman on news. The police force was trying to contact the leader of the gunmen, but he wouldn't respond. Shooting those 2 gunmen had alerted the rest of the 3 gunmen. Now we had 3 rifles and 6 knives, with other classroom stuff that we had collected. The leader sent his bodyguards to check what had exactly happened. During all of this, the leader via speaker announced that if we create any more chaos, then he would murder our principal then and there. This didn't affect us since the principal was our least favorite person. But we believed in humanity. So keeping that in mind, we tried to gather everyone in one classroom silently. But this time around, the gunman came in through the windows and got hold of our teacher, thinking that she was the mastermind behind this. They took her and we couldn't do anything about it. While the terrorist leader's right hand took our professor, his other teammates stayed behind to keep a check on us. Some of us were separated, so now we had to be more careful. We kept the rifles and knives hidden with us so that he wouldn't confiscate them. He was smart enough to be tricked, but we couldn't just give up. So we checked the rope from which they got in, and a few of us tried to escape through that. This got the attention for which we laid this plan. The leader's left hand ran into the classroom when we hit him from behind on the head and neck with the rifles. He didn't fall unconscious, so we had to stab and tie him. 2 more to go. We kept the escaping on priority. It was in no time when the leader would come to check on his other man. So we hurried the next classroom mates too. And there he was, 6 feet tall with wide shoulders, his face has scars like the ones soldiers get from war. His presence itself was scary. He came to us with an annoyed face and asked us if we knew why he attacked our school. We shook our heads no. Apparently, 10 years ago his daughter who studied in this very school and was been failed by our principal because he favored his daughter over his duty. The hatred between those 2 girls, which resulted in failing the other girl, led to her devastation. Even after pleasing and pleading with the principal and his daughter, he wouldn't listen, and so she committed suicide from the school terrace. The principal used all his power to suppress the case, and hence it was never spoken about. This angered the leader, which later made him become a criminal to start with. We were speechless. All we had to say was that everyone wanted to go home. To which he said that we would, once the principal lets out the real story. He got the principal to see us, and our teary eyes. Mr. Ron, the principal opened up only to get us back home. So you hear a lot of stories about a gunman entering a school, and then the school going on lockdown. I know this might sound a little weird and insensitive of me, but the idea of a school going on lockdown gave me a rush. Obviously, it is a scary experience for the ones who have actually survived through one. But I would have never known until it happened to my school. Yes, it happened to me when my school went on lockdown. And no, it was not scary. It was in fact traumatizing. It haunts me even today. So it all happened when I was in high school. We were having our lunch break, and the bells rang. The lectures were about to begin. So as usual, students rushed back to their classes. And I used to move like a sloth. I hated studying. So as usual, I followed my typical route. I went to the washroom before heading toward my class. It would save me a few minutes from the boring professor's lecture. So I was relieving myself at my own pace when I heard a bell ring. It wasn't a typical one. It was an alarm for our school to go on lockdown. I got all excited because my school was doing these lockdown drills regularly. And these drills would train us on what to do in such situations. We students loved it. Because more importantly, they would kill a lot of time. So after 3 short alarms, I decided to rush to my class. But then I remembered that we were told to stay put. Yes, in our drills, we were told to stay wherever we were. And mainly hide wherever possible. So I was the happiest when the alarm rang, because I get to hide in the entire washroom. So I was moving around in there for about 20 minutes. I was a little restless because there was nothing else to do. Plus, usually by now, the students should have been asked to leave the building, 1 classroom at a time. But the hallway was dead silent. I tried to peek outside, but I could see no one. It was empty. Not a single soul was visible outside. I thought I had missed the noise when students were taken out. So I started to walk through the empty hallway. I couldn't see anyone through the glass in the classroom doors. Before I went for the main exit, I decided to pick up my school bag. I opened the door and I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I looked around, there were over 20 pairs of eyes staring at me. They gasped as I entered through the door. I saw their paranoid faces, and it got me completely confused. The professor pulled me behind the podium and made me hide there. I asked him what happened, and he whispered back. And my expression changed when I realized that this was not a drill. He told me that a student had seen a gunman enter the school during our lunch break. So she alarmed the professors, and they put the school on lockdown. I was reassured that the cops were on their way, or maybe had already reached, and we were supposed to stay in our positions. I was trying to process the entire turn of events when I heard a loud gunshot coming from the hallway. The classroom gasped in unison. The professor signaled us to not make any noise. The psycho killer was pacing outside our class. He hadn't seen us yet. Or maybe anyone. He seemed frustrated that he hadn't got anyone yet. And he was trying to make noises to create some panic. A loud shattering sound echoed in our classroom as he fired shots at our classroom door's glass. Luckily, no one was shot or injured. The deafening silence in the room was commendable. But it was haunting me back then, and it haunts me today. We were just one wrong step away from being killed by the psycho killer who was standing outside with a gun. The next 1 minute was terribly slow. But eventually, the man moved ahead and did not enter our class. As soon as he moved past, a girl whimpered in relief. She suppressed her noise. But some of it had made it past her hands that cupped her mouth. Now normally, this should have not been an issue because it was not much loud. But now that the glass was down, the voice could easily escape the classroom and reach the hallway. We heard a loud giggle outside. He sounded like an eccentric man when he said that. He heard it. A chill ran down our spine. We did not know what to do next. He mimicked the noise again and laughed like a maniac. My professor pulled me down as soon as the gunman reached our door. He peeped inside through the empty space where the glass used to be and asked,
"May I come in?"
and then laughed out loud. A student cried that he must have heard us. And that was it. He knew that we were hiding inside the classroom. He shouted at the top of his voice.
"Gotcha!"
He tried to unlatch the door by putting his hand through the broken glass. He couldn't reach. So we eventually gave up, and instead aimed his gun at the door's lock. He counted from 3 to 1 and then fired a shot. The shout made us all panic. We were ready to throw our bags and other belongings at him. But a loud thud got us all confused. The gunman had fallen to the floor. A bullet had gone through his head. Before we could come to a conclusion, a cop opened the door and asked us to stay put. He said that the threat has been neutralized, but they were going to do a precautionary check throughout the school. So we stayed inside for another hour. It was a big relief that the cops had the situation under control. We requested a cop to stay at the door and he obliged. The ambulance took the psycho killer and cleaned the crime scene. They did not want us to get traumatized by the bloody mess outside. Little did they know that the damage was already done. It was scary. And even today, it gives me the creeps. After that incident, I remember getting nightmares about it for weeks. I used to wake up in the middle of the night, panting and breathless. I hope the situation in America improves. We need better security in schools. Had the cop not reached in time, an entire class full of students, including me, would not have survived. But thank God, we came out alive from that horrible situation. I still wonder what would have happened if the cop had not reached on time. We were all ready to throw stuff at him. But it would have never been enough to stop a man with a gun. And by the looks of his, he would have cold-heartedly shot all of us. Maybe even giggled incessantly after it. I wish I had never heard that creepy laugh of his. I still remember when I was hiding in the library. It was dark in there because the school was on lockdown. The lights were shut and all students were hiding in classes. I was in the hallway when the alarm rang. So I did not have enough time to rush to my class. So instead of heading to the washroom, I decided to go to the library. Because honestly, it is too predictable to hide in the washroom. And that is one of the first places that these psycho shooters would look into to find unsuspecting students. That is why I went to the library. So that I could hide in there, between stacks of shelves filled with books. I assumed they would never come here, so I hid behind the very first shelf. It was near the door, so I could see if anyone enters. And to my shock, the door opened. A man with a long, sharp knife made his way inside. I panicked and crouched. This sudden movement made a book move. But luckily, he did not see it. He kept moving toward the counter, and I slowly stepped toward the second row of shelves. I wanted to get to the very back, at the earliest. So I tiptoed to the side, but my feet landed on a cracked wooden floor. So it made a squeaky noise. And the man was alerted. Since the library was empty, every little noise was echoing through it. I could sense that he had heard it, and that he was making his way toward me. So I paced without caring about the noise that my feet made. And I stopped to check if he was still following. Between the sound of my heart racing, I could hear his footsteps too. And other than the fact that he was close, he was in fact getting closer. I crouched and rushed deeper in. He shouted as he saw me moving slowly. I screamed and started running. He chased me like a maniac through the wide rows. His knife was high up in the air. It was long and pointy. It was probably that knife, but that day I ran like an Olympic sprinter. I ran around the library like a maze. He couldn't catch me, but he was always a few seconds behind me. I kept throwing books on the floor as obstacles in his path. He kept stumbling over those. I even threw some heavy books over him. As our gap increased, I started to make my way toward the exit. I escaped the library and locked it from the outside. He kept smacking his knife on the door, but it didn't open. I alarmed everyone and a professor came out for help. He pulled out an extinguisher and sprayed it over him. The man fell to the floor, with all the white mess on his face and beard. A girl rushed out with her pepper spray and sprayed it on the man lying on the floor. He struggled like a rat who had consumed rat poison. The cops reached in time, a little late perhaps. But that day, they appreciated our bravery. We students had collectively caught a psycho killer that had entered our school. It was my birthday when our school went into lockdown. Yes, it was, is, and will forever be my worst birthday ever. I was in my classroom with my friends when the bell rang 3 times, which meant that the school had encountered danger. It meant that the school was going on lockdown. Me and my fellow classmates looked out of the window to see what was happening. There was smoke everywhere. Clearing my view, I saw a squad of firemen opening their ladders. The basement and basketball ground were set on fire. It was not an accident according to them, since some had sprayed gasoline before setting the place on fire. The floor was locked by the guards so that no one would escape. But the question was, why would someone set the school on fire, and especially the basement, when there was no crowd there? I said this thought out loud to my friends, and this scared the shit out of us. It was when the bell rang again. A faculty had seen 2 killers enter the school with knives. That was the clue to the fire being just a mere distraction. All I knew was that my birthday was going to be an epic day. The news people had gathered around the school gate. The killers didn't know that we were alerted. The smoke was everywhere, which made it difficult for us to see around. Our professor ran into the classroom and closed the door behind him. He said that he had seen one of the killers near our classroom. We heard a thud. It was him. He yelled to open the door and warned us that he would break the glass and get in. We hid behind our desks. Our yelling had given the firemen a clue that we were in trouble. The glass of the door broke. It was the thief. He had a big sharp knife. He tried to unlock the door through the broken part, but for some reason, he wasn't able to. We were still silent. He went away. We all got back to sit at our desks, but it was not over. He came back. The killer was trying to break the door this time. He used all the force he had to break the door open, for which he was successful. He got into the classroom. His face was of someone we knew, one of the garden caretaker. He came to us with the knife and held one of the students captive so that we don't scream for help. The fireman came in silently behind him and caught him from behind. The 2 killers were caught and handed over to the police. Later, after all the investigation, we got to know that those 2 garden keepers were psychopaths who wanted to kill students so that they would get on the news.